Today we're going to be working on Lesson 39, which is found on page 203 of your text. In this lesson, we're going to be multiplying decimal numbers. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, let's say that you had a rectangle, and the rectangle was 5/10 meters long, and then 7/500 meters long, and you wanted to find the area. And so the area requires taking the length and multiplying it to the width. Well, one way to do this would be to say that 7/500 is the same thing as the fraction 7/500, and that 5/10 is the same thing as the fraction 5/10. And so we could multiply 7/500 times 5/10 to find our area. Well, 100 times 10 is 1,000. And 75 times 5 is 375. So then this would have an area of 375 thousandths square meters. And that could be our solution. But let's say that we did not want to convert these to fractions before we multiplied, that we wanted to multiply them as decimal numbers. Well, this is what we would do. We would say then that if I took 7/500 of a meter and multiplied that to 5/10 of a meter, that I could just take 75 times 5, which is 375, and then I could consider the number of place values in each one of these. There's two places to the right of the decimal point in 7/500. There's one place to the right of the decimal point in 5/10. So adding that together, I would have 3 places to the right of the decimal point in my product. So I'd count 1, 2, 3, and then I would insert my decimal. And 375 thousandths meters or square meters would be my answer. So we can multiply decimal numbers just like so. So let's look at example 1. In example 1, we're asked to multiply 2/500 and 7/10. Well, again, if I write the numbers vertically like so, it would look like this. Notice that I don't have to worry about lining up my decimal places because that doesn't matter. What I do need to do is just multiply 25 times 7, which is going to be 175. And then count places. 1, 2, 3 places to the right of the decimal point. So 1, 2, 3 places to the right of the decimal point. So my product would be 175 thousandths. Now let's look at example 2. In example 2, we're asked to multiply, well actually we're asked to just square a number. 2 5/10 squared. Well, 2 5/10 would be 2 5/10 times 2 5/10. So 25 times 5 is 125. Then I would drop a 0. And 25 times 2 is 50. Then I would add my partial products together. And then what I need to do is consider decimal places. There's one decimal place here to the right and one decimal place here. So I would need 2 in my product. So my solution or my product would be 6 2500. Look at example 3. In example 3, we have 1 6/10 times 3. Well, 6 times 3 is 18, and I carry a 1. 1 times 3 is 3 plus 1 is 4. I only have one number to the right of the decimal place in my factors, so I only need one digit to the right of the decimal place in my product. So then my answer would be 4 8/10. Okay, so when we're multiplying with decimal numbers, we don't have to worry about lining the decimals up. Instead, we count decimal places to the right of the decimal within our factors, and we just want to make sure they have the same number of decimal places within our product. Well, why don't you try your practice problems and then come back and we'll work on those together. Okay, so what we're doing is we're working with decimal numbers, and now we're multiplying our decimal numbers. Well, let's go ahead and try your practice problems and see how you did. Practice problem A. We're asked to multiply 15 times 3/10. Well, 15 times 3 is 45. We only have one decimal place, so we would insert our decimal between the 4 and the 5. So 4 5/10 is your product. Problem B, 1 5/10 times 3. Well, again, 15 times 3 is 45, and again, we only have one decimal place. So our same product, 4 5/10. Problem C, 1 5/10 now is being multiplied to 3/10. Well, again, 15 times 3 is 45, but now I have two digits to the right of the decimal place, so I need two digits to the right of the decimal place in my product. 45 hundredths would be my product. Problem D, we have 15 hundredths being multiplied to 3. Well, again, 15 times 3 is 45, and I have two digits to the right of the decimal in my factor, so I need two digits to the right of the decimal point in my product. 45 hundredths would again be my product. Problem E, we have 1 5/10 being multiplied to 1 5/10. Well, 15 times 5 is 75. Then I would drop a 0. 15 times 1 is 15. And then I would add, and I would get 225. But I have to consider the placement of my decimal. So 2 places to the right of the decimal point. So 2 places in my product. 2 25 hundredths would be my answer. Problem F, 15 hundredths times 10. Well, I would drop my 0 and then multiply 15 times 1. I need to place my decimal, 1, 2, so 1, 2. So 1 50 hundredths would be my product. Now remember that 1 50 hundredths is the same thing as 1 5/10 because this 0 has no value to it. So you could change your answer to 1 5/10, and that would be also a correctly written answer. Problem G, we have 25 hundredths being multiplied to 5/10. Well, again, 25 times 5 is 125. Then we have 1, 2, 3 decimal places, so 1, 2, 3 decimal places. And don't forget your customary 0. 125 thousandths would be my product. H, we have 25 thousandths being multiplied by 100. So again, I'm going to drop my 2 zeros. 25 times 1 is 25. Then I have 1, 2, 3 places, so 1, 2, 3. I would need to put my decimal between the 2 and the 5. So I have 2 500 thousandths. But remember that these two zeros don't add any value. So this is the same thing as 2 5/10. Problem I is asking us to square 8/10. Well, that would be 8/10 times 8/10. 8 times 8 is 64, and we have 2 decimal places. So 64 hundredths then would be my solution. In problem J, we're asked to square 1 2/10. So that's going to be 1 2/10 times 1 2/10. Well, 12 times 12 is 144. We have 2 decimal places. So this would be 1 44 hundredths. And that's it. Well, have a wonderful day and enjoy your math, and I'll see you tomorrow.